Hello everybody and welcome to another beginner's guide for Crusader Kings 3. Today we are going to talk about culture. Every character on Crusader Kings 3 has a culture, as does every county. Now, to see any character's culture, all you'd have to do is select the character, like I've just gone and selected our own character, and right here it will say their culture. As you can see, my character's culture is Irish. Just to show you this in a bit more, if I select this and click on him, once again, he is Irish. If we go a bit further afield, this character is Welsh. Whereas, if we click on this character is Anglo-Saxon. So, going back to ourselves, as I said, our culture is Irish, and you can find any character's culture by simply looking on their character page. You can also find your own culture in more details down here, and it is the little candle button. Once again, if you hover over it, just like many of the other controls in Crusader Kings 3, it will have a little pop-up window which will give you a bit more information. So let's go ahead and click on it and look at our culture in more details. Now, as you can see, we are of the Irish culture, and this literally says at the top, this is your culture. Now, we can click on other cultures, don't get me wrong. For those of you that may have noticed, as soon as I opened our culture page, the map changed to show all of the cultures in the different areas. So, for instance, looking a bit closer to home, we are Irish, we have Norse, who have gone and invaded a tiny bit of Ireland, we have Gaelic, Scots, Anglo-Saxon, Cumbrian, Welsh, or even Cornish. Now, going back to our own culture again, starting from the top, you have two tabs on your culture page, the Traditions and Pillars, and this is the background or what your culture stands for in essence. And then the second tab is Innovations. This, in Crusader Kings 3, is like your research, and research is done by cultures. It is not done by individual characters, it is culture by culture. So starting on this first tab, starting at the top, you can see that our culture is courtly. This is, putting it in a basic term, the type of, shall we say, government, or the type of people you wish to be seen as. And we will have a look at the other ones very shortly, but Irish, as you can see, starts as a courtly culture. And then, as you can see, out from the pop-up window that has happened, as I've hovered over courtly, there are different bonuses from being a courtly culture. Then, coming back down, you have your culture pillars. Now, these are the basis of your culture. As you can see, we are a Goidelic heritage. This basically is pre-put into Crusader Kings 3, and this is where the roots of your culture come from. This can be shared with other cultures. For instance, Gaelic. Oh, that wasn't supposed to click itself off there. Nope, why is that not working? Let's zoom out a bit more. There you go. Gaelic, as you can see, is also Goidelic heritage. So because the fact that Irish and Gaelic share heritage, their characters are going to naturally get along with each other a little bit better. Whereas, as you can see, for example, Cumbrian is Brythonic. I also know Welsh and Cornish are also Brythonic heritage. So once again, characters of the Cornish, Welsh or Cumbrian culture will naturally get along with each other a little bit better, because they come from the same roots. Next we have our language, exactly the same thing, except we're now talking about language as opposed to heritage. We speak the Goidelic language, and so once again, anyone you share a language with will naturally have a bit of a better opinion of you. But you can, in this as a scheme, which we will go over through in different videos, learn different languages, and learning other people's languages removes the negative effect of being from different cultures. Next we have Marshal, and this is basically, as you can see when I've hovered over it, who is allowed to be commanders and knights. And this, as set with the Irish culture, as set with a lot of the starting Christian cultures, which Irish is Martial men only. Some of the cultures in Crusader Kings 3 do start differently. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen any from my experience yet, although I'm not saying there aren't any, because I have not tried every culture or every area in the game. I have not seen any that start with women only, but there are some I know that are mixed. Next come along, we have Irish aesthetics. This is basically just what things are going to generally look like, the kind of clothes you will see your characters in, and when you become a king, and if you have the Royal Court DLC, what your court will look like. Just below that we have traditions. Now, these are the things that your people believe in, or that they practice a lot, shall we say. And these, once again, give you perks, positive and negative. So starting excuse me, starting from the top left, as you can see, the Irish are pastoralists, which means that they are better in open pasture of lands. Refined poetry, so the Irish are known to be poets. Polygamous, which means that they can have up to 4 spouses, and apologies, I have always struggled to pronounce that word. They have maritime mercantilism, which basically means, as you can see, they get slight bonuses from coastal counties. And then monastic communities. They have a slightly more monk-like tradition in their communities. Now, these are set from the beginning, but they can be added to. I do not believe you can remove them, although feel free to correct me in the comments below, but I have not seen a way to remove traditions, only add. Although, to be fair, I've not overly tried too much, because over the course of a game, to add a tradition will take you 10 to 20 years, and then you have a 50-year cooldown. So you're not going to be swapping them out and in that often, but you can certainly add things to them to develop your culture and give you bonuses as you play through the game. Now, staying on the same screen as we move down, you can reform the Irish culture, and this will allow you to change some of the options you see in front of you, which I will click on very shortly. Or you can diverge your culture, and this is where you will make a slightly Irish offshoot culture. Just below that, you can see that there is a cultural head, and that is me. The cultural head is the person of that culture who owns the most counties of that culture. As I said, all counties have culture as well, which if I show you now, if we zoom in so we can actually select a county. If I click on the county down here, you will see the culture of this county is Irish. Irish, Irish, and then if we move a bit further afield, just to show you the difference, here we have Welsh. As you can see as well, this culture has a red box behind it when it says it is Welsh. This simply indicates that it is a different culture to you. So now if we jump back into the culture screen. So the ruler of this culture has the most Irish counties in their realm, which is me. I have 3 Irish counties in my realm. And then just below that, you see your current fascination. Your current fascination is what you are researching. It's what your culture is fascinated in. So basically, it's what they are trying to learn next. We will go more into that in a minute, as that is actually the second tab of the culture screen. Now, as I said, you can change a lot of these details, and to do that, you would have to click to reform your culture. So if I click on Reform Irish, as you can see, many of these options are changeable. For instance, I can change the type of court I wish to have, or the type of background I wish my people to have, however you would like to exactly label that part of your culture. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more options, including the one we start with. That makes 7. These will all take 13 years to change, and as you can see, take a whopping 20,000 prestige. And of course, then all of these then come with different types of benefits. For instance, you can see Bellicose. That is clearly a military benefit, as it gives me bonuses on mercenaries, prowess, and men-at-arms. If we go down, obviously, then spiritual, we're looking at piety and faith, creation and reformation costs being less, because we will be a spiritual people. And then, if I close that, moving just down, we have the martial. Now, obviously, then I can change this, as I mentioned earlier, to either equal or women only. And once again, this has a base cost. There will be other things that can factor into change the costs of these, but the base cost will always be there. Now, as you can see, then we have the traditions. I can actually change these. I can't remove them, but I can change them. So if I click that, now if I chose a different one, that would then replace pastoralists, people who like pastures. And the new tradition I choose will then replace it. Or, of course, I can simply add a new tradition. I mean, if you don't have all the traditions and one of them isn't hamstringing you with your gameplay, there really is no reason to replace it. You never know when it might come in use. Now, traditions, as you can see here, are split into 5 areas. Your round traditions, and these have a lot of things. As you can see, we've got equal heritage, esteemed hospitality, which will have to do with guests. There was one earlier about eunuchs, garden architects. These are things that generally have to do with your whole round. For instance, wetlands, mountain homes. And again, these will generally quite often go on what is already in your culture's home. For instance, mountain homes. As you can see, this is grayed out. I cannot choose mountain homes, and this is because my culture is not present in any county with a mountain or desert mountain terrain. So as you can see, some of them do have prerequisites. And then, of course, these also all have costs as well, which do greatly vary. For instance, if I just go on this one because it's next to me, which I'm going to regret because I can barely say it, parochialism. Don't actually know what exactly means. But as you can see, if I hover over it, the base cost is 2,000. But because I do not have a city holding in at least 90% of the counties that share my culture, it costs an extra 3,000. Now, some of these costs may vary. For instance, I know one further on about musicians, and it costs extra if you do not have at least 4 poets in your culture. And so then moving around, for instance, if we see wetlands, that is a base cost of 2,000 because I have lots of wetland territory in Ireland. So that is not a problem for the Irish culture. And now these go across. We have realm, we have warfare, mostly to do with warfare, etc., etc. Social, these are mostly to do, again, kind of interactions between people. And so, for instance, the one I mentioned, musical theorists. My culture doesn't have 3 rulers with the poet trait, so it will cost me 3,000 more. Ritual, to do with more religions and how you can do things. For instance, sacred hunts. Hunt activities provide piety, because they are now sacred. There's a lot of this is to do with religion. And then regional. Now, these will change depending on your culture. For instance, as you can see here, I have the Witten Agamut, which basically means that I can then use Saxon elective succession law. Now, other cultures, like I said, will have different regional things. For instance, I know for a fact, as I have a Welsh playthrough currently on the go, which you are more than welcome to go and watch, as you will see me play with cultures in that video as I go along. One of the regional cultures that I could pick up was longbowmen. Now, obviously, any of you know anything too much about history or even know much about what the Welsh culture, longbows were a very prevalent thing in the Welsh culture. Now, on this one, they do start with the Welsh culture because on my playthrough, I started at the earlier time slot, the earlier starting year, as opposed to this game is in the later starting year. So you will find in the different starting years that the traditions might be a little bit different as well. And so if I wanted to add or replace any of these traditions, all I would have to do is pay the piety cost, which once again can get very expensive, depending on whether you have the prerequisites or not. They will all call a base of 2,000, for instance. You can also see on this one, my culture does not have a stoic or bureaucratic ethos. The ethos being, like I said, the kind of government, the kind of ethics you try and promote through your culture. And so that will also add an extra 2,000. Different traditions are more aligned with different ethoses, and I'm not going to lie, it's probably not worth chopping and changing just to get the correct traditions in, because for instance, even with the bonus, this costs 7,000. As we saw earlier, ethoses cost 20,000 each time you wish to change. So anyway, I'm going to close this screen and click cancel. Now, as I mentioned, every time you add a tradition, you then have to wait 50 years to add another tradition, or even then change another tradition. From what I know, completely off the top of my head, changing the marshal does not follow the same rules. And to be honest with you, I'm not 100% about the ethos, but I believe you can change this at different times to your traditions as well. So if I just click cancel. And like I said, diverging culture, this is where I would select a whole new culture, change all the things, choose my traditions. This will then come up with a cost depending on how many changes I have made. And then it will see, for instance, my close family will convert. 0 out of 0 vassals will convert. So I have 0 vassals and none of them will convert, although that will always happen whenever you change either a culture or a religion. You will be able to find out not only how many vassals will convert, but it will then tell you which ones will not. So you can, for instance, attempt to increase their opinion of you before you make the change so they convert with you. As like I said, being of a different culture, and the same is for religion, will cost you negative opinion modifiers. And if people hate you, guess what, guys? They're gonna try and kill you, take your land, and constantly steal what's yours. So you don't really want the people around you to hate you too much, unless, of course, you intend on crushing them first, at which point then, let a man hate. On the next tab, we have innovations. As I mentioned, in Crusader Kings 3, this is basically your culture's research. And as I mentioned as well, you research per culture, not per character. Also a warning there for if you change your culture for whatever reason, you may then change your innovations. And especially if you are the culture head and you have put a lot of effort into gaining a few innovations that you want to promote your style of gameplay or to give you slight advantages, then you could end up losing them. So always be careful if you are playing around with things like your culture. Now, your innovations are split into 4 areas, and these are basically 4 ages. The first being tribal, then being early medieval, high medieval, and late medieval. Now, a lot of these are fairly similar, but then they do upgrade as they go along. For instance, the one on the top right is currently an onager. This is a basic siege weapon. In the next age, it becomes a mangonel. In the next age, a trebuchet. And in the final age, a bombard cannon. Now, all of these are simply men-at-arms regiments that are siege weapons that you will be able to hire once you have done the research. Once again, if you're looking for more about men-at-arms regiments, there will, of course, be another video about men-at-arms regiments. And as you can see, this was the same for the 3rd age as well as the 4th age. I do apologise. As it says, I don't have access to this age yet, and that is because I have not discovered at least 50% of the innovations from the early medieval era, which is the medieval era, or the era before, not just the medieval era, it's just an era. And if I click on the last one, first I must reach the high medieval area. The high medieval era, I do apologise folks, getting a bit tongue twisted here. After that, I will then have to learn 50% of the available innovations from the medieval era. And then I will be able to get into the late era. Now, as you can see, it also has to be the year 1200. So if you smash your innovations and you get them all locked down real nice and early, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to steamboat ahead of anybody else. And that's also the same for the computer. We will not, for instance, start seeing bombard cannons until about 1220, 1240 at the extreme earliest. Obviously, this game plays through to 1400 and something, I think 50 something. So that does give everyone plenty of time to start putting these innovations in place. Now, if I go back to the early medieval era, that's the current age we have. Don't get me wrong, we can also look at the era before, but as you can see, all of these are research. They are all in green writing, and we do have some down here which are cultural and regional. Now, these will always be shown, but they can only be learned by certain cultures. For instance, if I wanted to learn longships, I would have to have the Irish culture present in Northern Europe. And that's either 12 countries in Northern Europe, or 40% of all Irish counties are inside Northern Europe. And that would allow me to research longships, and this would then come with other benefits. So now, if I go to the early medieval era, this is the era I am currently on, and as you can see, some of these are still in yellow. These are the ones that are yet to be learned, and as you can always see for the eagle-eyed, there is a progress bar. Now, there are 2 ways of learning innovations with a bit more speed. Everything slowly increases over time on its own, but then there are 2 ways to increase the speed at which you learn specific innovations. One is by selecting which innovation your culture is fascinated with. As I mentioned earlier, which was shown down here, our cultural fascination is communal government, which you can also see is this one here. Expected to be discovered in 65 years. So as you can see, it's not a fast process. But just as an example, if we're not fascinated in it, it will take 391 years. So being fascinated, it does very much decrease the time frame, as 391 years, this game will be very much over. The other way to learn it is by cultural bleed, in essence. As you can see, basically current exposure. Our culture is currently being exposed to an innovation, boosting its progress. We are currently being exposed to horseshoes. And this basically means that any culture that we somehow share a link with, and trust me, I've seen some very random links on this game, usually through religion though, to be honest, we can then learn an innovation. So it's not just going to be your neighbour. For instance, I am learning this off the Castilians, because I share a religion with them. Now, the Castilians are all the way down in Spain. So you would think, oh, I'll just learn off the Gaelics or the Welsh or the Anglo-Saxons, but no. Anybody who you have a link with, you can then be exposed to and learn one of their innovations. Now, as you can see, this is expected to take about 44 years. Now, if you very much wanted to push a specific innovation and you are lucky enough for the exposure to end up on that innovation, because unfortunately you can't choose your exposure or change it, you can, of course, for instance, if I was like, no, I really want horseshoes, I'd love to have my armies have faster movement speed. I can also choose to be fascinated by horseshoes, as well as it being exposed to me. As you can see, this now went down to 28 years from 44. This is because not only am I fascinated with it, I am also being exposed to it. So it's getting, shall we say, a double dip. Now, I will just click that back, not that it really matters for the sake of this tutorial, but as you can see, that's jumped back up to 44 years. Now, obviously, if I got it halfway and then jumped off it, it would jump up to 22 years, not 44 minus, I don't know, 7 years that it would take me to get halfway or something silly. It is obviously a percentage progress bar. And as I said, all of these have different benefits. Now, a couple to basically give you a quick rundown. As I said, top right, that's always your siege weapons. The ones at the top are generally, well, as you can see, to do with the military. The top right one is generally to do with military buildings. As you can see, Burrs unlocks all medieval era military buildings and battlements above it, allows you to create higher level castles or forts. The other ones are then usually to do with your soldiers. Coming down, you then have the civic innovations. Now, the one in the top left of the civic innovation is always to do with your succession law. Basically, as you keep learning these, you will be able to get access to better and better succession, which once again, we will talk about in a separate video. Coming across, then we have stuff again to do with buildings, but economic. Coinage, which is always about development growth. Chronicle writing, which is to do with being able to press claims. And then, for instance, royal prerogative will do with your crown authority. Communal government. Counties now reach maximum existing development penalty at 35. And as I will quickly show you, these generally stay the same as you go through ages. For instance, if we quickly drop back, gravel kind. I can now do a different kind of succession. Public works is to do with the development. They have switched those two around, one being above the other. Doesn't really make too much of a difference. Casus belli, the things I can push claims on. Planetary assemblies, I can do limited crown authority. Just like on the other one, I could have done higher levels of crown authority. So as you can see, these are quite level-based innovations. Now, that's not to say, at least I do not believe, that you actually have to have, for instance, the ability to be able to do, where are we, say Confederate partition law, although everyone starts with that because that is pretty much, that is the majority of peoples that I've come across starting succession kind, to actually be able to then do hereditary rule. For instance, if I go to heraldry, it says I'm not in the high medieval area, of course, so I can't click on it, but it does not say that I need hereditary rule to be able to learn this. So if I, for some reason, had skipped hereditary rule, which I would suggest that being one of the slightly more important ones, because that's to do with how your titles split when you die, I could in fact skip straight to heraldry. So therefore, it would not mean I would have to go back and learn hereditary rule first. So I would save a bit of time if for some reason I'd accidentally missed anything out. And so as I mentioned, those are all of the innovations of your culture. And that is basically your technology tree in Crusader Kings 3. Now, if I have a quick look down here. There you go. I can recruit hobilars as men-at-arms. And that is because I am Irish. Quite a few of the cultures do have something somewhere in the cultural and regional area of innovations. But obviously, you quite often only get one per culture. You might get some quite close to you that you might be able to dip into, but most cultures only get one. So, that is the explanation on cultures for Crusader Kings 3. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, as I said, stick them in the comments. Let me know if there's anything in particular further you'd like to know about Crusader Kings 3 or one of the other areas that I have not yet made a video for. Stick it in the comment section, and I will bump this video to the top of the queue of what I make next. While I hope that has helped any of you looking for an explanation on culture for Crusader Kings 3, and I hope that will help improve your gameplay and answer many questions that you may have. Well, until next time, folks, feel free to jump in and watch any of my actual playthroughs of Crusader Kings 3 if you want to see some gameplay and how some of these things can interact with each other. Otherwise, have a lovely day. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.